Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do a mixed haul. I got a bunch of books and movies, a few CDs to go through that I've picked up in the last while. I've been doing more of the father-daughter movie reviews. If you noticed, if you've been watching my channel, than these. So I thought maybe I'd put one in because I need to start putting stuff away. It's piling up on my desk. So, all right, first thing I'd like to do is show you the Vengeance trilogy. All right. So I'd already watched two, and in previous videos I reviewed Old Boy and Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Well, I finally watched the third film. It was a while ago, which is Lady Vengeance. All right, so a haunting tale of wrongful accusations, righteous anger, and above all, the quest to exact a deadly revenge. This film's absorbing, non-linear narrative tells the story of Li Guanjia, and imprisoned for 13 years for a murder she didn't commit. Anyway, she takes out her vengeance on it. This one's good. So if I was to rank them, probably this one, then this one, and then this one. But maybe others would rank them differently. But basically, all three of them are very good films, and they all have a theme of vengeance to them. The films don't have any relation to each other. It's not like a trilogy, like say the Dark Knight trilogy, where one film follows the other. These are basically individual films, but it's basically the director's, I guess, fascination with vengeance and in its different forms, and decided to make it like movies until he got it out of his system, right? So that's cool. This box set is a really nice box set. If you can find it, it's really good. It is for Region B, though. It's a Region B box set, so it won't play on regular Blu-ray players, right? So, all right, so what else? Let's do some books. All right, so Man's Search for Meaning. If you have not read this book, please, read it. It's extremely good. This is basically, Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. He was in the ghetto, if I remember correctly. You know, the Jewish ghetto in Poland. And then he ended up going to the gas chambers, but he ended up surviving. But it was his time in the ghetto and in the concentration camps in Poland that he talks about in this, and it's not it's depressing to read about it, but he has a positive message out of it that there's a way that you can survive almost anything as a human being if you have the right attitude, if you have the right way of thinking. And he noticed a lot of his fellow Jews did not, and they didn't survive, right? So it was like he based the system on that he learned in I don't know if it was Auschwitz, but anyways, in Poland, and he says you can apply it to everyday life whenever you're get into some bad situations, right? So everybody who's read this, I've never heard of a bad review of this book. I've never heard of anything bad said about this book. So all right. And I have C.S. Lewis's Miracles. So basically, C.S. Lewis is a when he's not writing fiction, anyways, he's a Christian apologist. All right. So, and I mean, his most famous Christian apology book is probably Mere Christianity, but he has others as well, including this one, which is Miracles, and he talks about is there such things as miracles? Do they actually exist, and so on. And C.S. Lewis is a very popular Christian writer. Many people read him. All right. Then we got The Origins of Species, the book that changed the world, basically, that pushed religion back another step from science. People always say that science and religion are on opposite sides and they're fighting each other, but you could actually argue that science just, proves God, you know what I mean? In a way, if you think about it, the more complicated systems that you figure that science figures out and how everything works, the more intricate it is, the more it's like, yeah, is it just random or what, right? So I don't know if you believe in God or not, but this basically pushed the church out of the mainstream a lot when Darwin noticed that he can trace back species to like a adaptation thing where some species adapt and others didn't, and so some go extinct and some don't, and you can see the lineage going. He sees this lineage going through species. So that kind of put a kibosh on the idea that everything was just created like that or whatever in 7 days or whatever, right? What I mean? So it's an extremely good book to read, even though it's what is it, like 175 years old? What would be the 1850s? 150, 175 years. So, all right. So the origin of species. One of the great love stories. These letters have been read by tons of people. The letters of Abelard and Heloise. All right, and it's basically a love life with the written word, them writing back and forth to each other. So if you like romance, you probably like that book. Then you got probably my argument for the greatest philosophical book of all time, and that's Plato's Republic. Plato goes through what makes a just society. This is where the allegory of the cave is. This is where all the other things that Socrates talks about in Plato's novels, in Plato's books comes most, I don't know if you would say concentrated, but he has a bunch of different dialogues, but this is probably his most famous book, and it's quite a mind-blowing experience reading it. All right. What else do we have here? We have The Clockmaker. All right. So this is Haliburton's book it's one of the early books of Canadian literature. This insignia, the M&S, which is McClellan and Stewart, they put out the New Canadian Library starting back in the 50s or the 60s. They started putting out paperback versions of Canadian novels, and they've gone through a whole bunch of different series. This would be probably the 6th version of the library. They originally started in paperback form, and then the last version before M&S was bought out by foreign conglomerates. I don't know who owns M&S now, but we no longer see the New Canadian Library. It's not in print anymore. This was the last version of it. They made them into like softcover size, but a little bit smaller than your average softcover, right? A little bit smaller. But of all the different books that have been written in Canada since Canada, even before Canada was a country, right? So they're good to read. I picked them up more out of sentimentality because I had a website where I went through this whole library. It's no longer up because I didn't support it financially anymore after I did it. Basically, I went through the whole library, listed all the books, gave images for all the different books and everything else. You can actually find it if you want. It's not complete because the images don't really load, but Wikipedia, if you go on New Canadian Library in the Wikipedia, if you go down into the footnotes, you'll see that where they got that list that's on Wikipedia, the list of all the books in the New Canadian Library, where they got that list was from me on my website, right? And what they did was they took a snapshot of that website, or basically downloaded that website onto their server. And once I stopped doing the website and then stopped financing it, and then it went off, what they did was they took it and they put it on Wikipedia. But the only way that you get it is if you go into the footnotes and you look at one of the footnotes, and then it has a link that says New Canadian Library. You click it, and then it ncl.ca or whatever, it ends up showing my website and all the books of the library. If you want to know every book that's in this library, I collected the whole library, and I had every copy of every book, and did images for all of them, and spoke about it, its history and everything else, and its importance in the progression of Canadian literature. Because at the time, professors and that wanted to teach Canadians its own its own culture, right? The Canadian book, the Canadian poetry, Canadian novel, and all that. But they couldn't because, I mean, all these novels were put out originally in hardcover, first edition, second edition, depending on how many people bought them or whatever, right? But what happened is they ended up eventually just going out of print. So if you wanted to find The Clockmaker, the only way you could find it would be to find a hardcover of it somewhere. And so it was difficult for students to find books, and it was difficult for professors to teach Canadian literature because they would have to tell their students to go try to find, hardcover books of books that may have been, published like 100 years earlier. You know what I mean? And then you got to go looking for it. And it's an antique book, and you may be spending hundreds of dollars on it. You know what I mean? So basically, what McClellan and Stewart did was, hey, let's put out paperback versions of all of our Canadian novels so that students can buy them and professors can teach Canadian literature, right? And so this was the result. But the original ones were paperback size, right? And this is the last version of them. They decided to go all out with really nice editions at the end, and then they disappeared. Now the only way you ever get any Canadian literature is if it's new Canadian literature published by a publisher, or these sometimes come in Penguin Modern Classics or other Penguin books as well. So and that kind of thing. So you do get them there, or you just pick up used copies of these ones, right? Anyway, so it's kind of depressing when you think of the state of Canadian literature. I mean, you have some big names like Margaret Atwood will always sell, Alice Munro, these like big authors that have an international audience will always sell well, even in Canada. But you get the ones that are more local, that are not as popular worldwide, but are important in Canadian literature. The only way that you can find them is in the New Canadian Library and its competition through the years. Like Macmillan had its Laurentian was another one that had books coming out, Canadian novels coming out or whatever, right? So, but the main is the New Canadian Library. It was just, I can't remember, I think it was like 220 volumes altogether, I can't remember. And basically the history of Canadian literature in paperback, basically. All right. So, but the problem with this is that if I put, let's say, this book up and this book up at the same time, this would sell 10, 20 times as faster than this would sell. Right? This is one of Canada's earliest books, and this is an American book, right? You understand? So Canadians prefer reading American and British, and if they're French speaking, then French literature more than Canadian literature. There's like a reputation that Canadian literature is kind of boring. You know what I mean? It's a lot of the early stuff is pastoral. Where As for Me in My House or others was about like country life and difficulties living in Canada, right? And the stories are kind of bleak, and the stories are kind of, well, in a way, a bit pedestrian. It wasn't until probably the late 50s to early 60s that Canadian literature kind of flourished and kind of got out of its old roots, kind of thing, and was more contemporary, right? So anything from the 60s on is really good stuff. Before the, let's say, the 1950s, you're getting into, it's more, the backwoods of Canada, that kind of stuff, where you get descriptions of like what Canada is like and that kind of thing, rather than powerful storylines and everything, right? But I may be biased, I don't know. But anyways, Canadian literature is not sold to Canadians at a higher rate than foreign literature is. Canadians would rather read foreign literature than Canadian literature. So even though I picked it up, it's more of a nostalgia thing. I know I'm going to list this, and I'm going to list this, and this is going to sell quite quick, and this is going to stay on my shelf for years, maybe, depending on if a person ends up taking a Canadian literature course in a university or is like one of the I don't know, 5% of all Canadians that like to read Canadian literature, like historic Canadian literature. So we'll see. It's kind of depressing. It's same thing with television and other stuff. We're like bombarded by British, French, and especially American culture, and we prefer the American culture in that over our own, right? So, all right. So that's Haliburton's The Clockmaker. Well, okay. And then I found this. All right. Giant print, the new King James version of the Bible, right? So very beautiful. It's leather bound. It's a really nice edition. All right. Gold foil around it, right? And it's large print, and it's basically new. Nobody's ever really read it. It's got a ribbon to mark your place, right? And then in the New Testament, it has the the different colored print when Jesus talks. Whenever Jesus talks, it's red print rather than black print, right? So it's an extremely beautiful novel, and I found it for like $4, right? Still in its basically new form, protected with this paper slip over it, right? So yeah, this is nice. Somebody's gonna buy this off of me and have a really nice Bible for their house, right? All right. So what else can we do here? All right. So I've always talked about 5 things that I collect. All right. So I collect the New Canadian Library, the new version of it that started. Well, it's not really new anymore. It started in the early '90s, and then the older version of the Everyman Library, right? So the new and the old version of the Everyman Library, the modern library, old version. The new version I don't collect because it's not numbered. All right. And then I like on the books that I really enjoyed when I read them, I'd like to get like a really nice leather-bound edition or a folio society edition of that for a keepsake, right? So I do have sections for it in my in the basement in my room, in my den, I guess you could call it, and the folios are the ones that pop up most in the secondhand places. All right, folios probably about five times more. You'll have a 5 times better chance of finding a folio before you'll find, let's say, a Frankl library or an Easton Press, which are the 2 main leather-bound versions of books that are out there, right? So I do come across them. I came across 2 the other day. So, but usually the folios are a little bit more prevalent in the secondary market. People get rid of them more after buying them than they do the leather-bound editions. But they're really, really nice. And here's an example of one. So all the folios have a book, but they also have a hard cardboard slip cover, right, to protect the book. So they don't have dust jackets. They just have these hard slip covers, all right? And they protect it really well. But people actually want to see these things in pristine condition as well, right? So if you have some blemishes or other things, the main point of this is to protect the book, but then you got to protect this as well. So I would suggest, if you're going to keep it, I would put it in a plastic container to protect this as well. If you ever end up reselling it, it'll end up being like twice the price if this is in really mint shape as well. The book will usually always be in mint shape. The only damage to the book itself will usually be, right, is if you put it up on a shelf and the spine is facing outwards and the sun gets to it and discolors this, right? But they're really nice editions. See how beautiful that is? You open it up, it's really nice print. All right. Right. It's a really nice book. So basically this is the Berlin Diaries of Mary Vasilchikov. I don't know anything about this book. I just found it yesterday on a shelf in a thrift store, and it was $4, so I picked it up. People collect the Folio Society really well, so I can probably sell this for $25, $30, right? Especially in its condition, because it's extremely it's in basically mint condition. There's nothing wrong with it at all. and somebody bought it and then didn't want it anymore, so they gave it to the thrift store, and I found it for like $4. So that'll help me with purchasing more movies. All right. So then I found this book, another one for $4, and this is DK's the philosophy book. Basically, let's say you've never read any philosophy at all. All right. And philosophy is one of the more popular things to read. People will read fiction over everything else. All right. Literature, right? Stories rather than nonfiction. Let's say history, that kind of thing. People do read history. I'm not saying that they don't, but probably the number one seller is fiction or literature. Storytelling. The second best is probably philosophy, if it's not history, right? So you got nonfiction books as well, but philosophy is extremely important. And almost every philosophy book that you like, Plato's Republic, I'm going to put that up, and I'll probably sell it within a week, right? So here's a nice hardcover called The Philosophy Book, Big Ideas Simply Explained. Basically, it goes through the history of philosophy and explains simply what the concepts were that added to philosophy. So you have a history of philosophy from the early Greeks, and if you want to go east, there's even more. But let's see, in the Western tradition, you have the early Greeks and the Romans, and then you go forward from there, right? And you go all the way up to modern. So it'll go through everything and explain it simply for people that may have picked up, let's say, Wittgenstein or something, or Nietzsche, and don't understand what he's talking about because he's talking above their head. A lot of stuff, especially German philosophy, for me is kind of talks above my head, so I have to read like companions and other things to understand what the hell they're saying, right? So this is kind of like that. So if you haven't really read philosophy at all, right, and you want to start reading it, then this may be a good book for you if you want to go look for it. Basically, all the different ideas through history in philosophy explained simply, right? They don't get into the huge details of it or whatever. Mainly what philosophy books do is they'll explain what their theory or idea is, and then they go about like 3/4 of the rest of the book is like defending why they think that, right? So if you can get like simply, tell me what you mean by what you're saying, tell me what you think your idea is that's true, and then tell me what you mean by it. Well, you can do that with this book, all right? So you just get simply. So man is an invention of recent date. Happy is he who has overcome his ego. I think, therefore I am. All these different philosophical ideas are explained in this. And it's a good primer before you start reading the actual philosophical writers, right? So, all right, so we did that. We did those. We did this. Sun Also Rises. I've talked about this book numerous times, so I'm not going to talk about it now. Hemingway is one of the great American writers. And let's do some movies and CDs. All right, so I found a bunch of 4Ks from a gentleman. I found 4 of them, but I think one of them is upstairs because I'm watching it upstairs with my wife. But the 3 that I have here are Philadelphia. I'm not sure if you read this. This isn't as relevant as it was when it first came out. When it first came out, this was like an astonishing film. Basically, Denzel Washington plays a lawyer, and Tom Hanks plays a gay man who ends up getting AIDS. All right, and Denzel Washington has to overcome his bigotry, I guess. What would you call it if you don't want to be around somebody because they have a disease, even though you don't catch it, right? But you're still nervous being around somebody with a disease that could kill you, right? So he has to overcome that, whatever that word is for that, and be his lawyer and defend himself in court because he was fired. He's a lawyer as well, and he was fired from his job because he had a disease, right? So because there's a lot of, if you weren't living through the 80s, you wouldn't understand, or maybe you could. I mean, but basically, AIDS was a big scare thing, right? I mean, the religious right just went nuts on that, saying that it's a gay virus to kill off homosexuals because God doesn't like homosexuals. But in the mainstream, most of it was, it hit the gay community more than it hit any other community because they were having unprotected sex more than, let's say, and the physical act of lovemaking between two men is going to involve the rear end, right? And that's where the disease spread the quickest. If I don't know, I may be bigoted myself. So, but basically, AIDS is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. You don't die of it, but basically, it attacks your immune system, and then you catch a cold, and then you die from the cold or whatever, right? So, it devastated the gay community in the 80s and 90s until they found an antiviral cocktail that they could give to people who caught it. Now, the main way you caught it was through unprotected sex. They think it started in the gay community and then spread out from there. So, heterosexuals were getting AIDS as well through unprotected sex. And needle sharing needles where somebody who's affected shoots some heroin, then gives the needle to somebody else, and that somebody else shoots heroin, and then the virus gets in his bloodstream, right? And people were dying left and right from this disease. It was basically a death sentence if you got it. You would slowly get sick. You'd start getting like sores on your skin and stuff, and you'd eventually die of some viral infection or bacterial infection, right? So this took that head on, all right, and it's extremely powerful film, but I think it lost some of its bite over the years since you now can live with AIDS with proper medication and basically live your life. You may have a shortened lifespan, but you still live a full life, right? So, all right, so that's Philadelphia. The other one that I picked up was a 4K version of Lightyear, which basically, so Pixar came out with 4 films, and in the first film, Buzz Lightyear thinks he's actually really a ranger, like a space ranger, and that was the funny thing about Toy Story, was that he didn't realize he was a toy, right? So, and then everybody else kind of has to prove to him that he is a toy, and then he realizes he's a toy, and he's a member of this big group of toys, of Andy's toys, right? So, but at the beginning, he thought he was a space ranger, right? Anyways, so the story of how Buzz Lightyear was a space ranger is this, and it's basically the opening scene to this is a written word on the screen that says, Andy got a Buzz Lightyear because he watched the film, and it got him excited and wanted him to have the toy. And they said, this is the film, and then they made the film for it, and this is the film for it. So it's okay. It's not a great film. The animation is really good in it, as per usual, and from Pixar. The story is fun. I don't know if you watched it. I'm going to ruin it, so this will be a spoiler. Basically, you know who Zurg is, right? If you watch the first Toy Story movie, he talks about battling Zurg, right? And everybody thinks Zurg is like this evil guy or whatever. Well, Zurg is just basically Buzz Lightyear from the future, right? So it's kind of interesting that twist kind of reminded me of The Prisoner. If you ever seen The Prisoner from the 1960s, that starring, what was his name, Patrick? Peter McGowan? Anyways, he's like a James Bond character, and he gets kidnapped, and he wakes up on this island, and he's a prisoner on this island, and all the episodes of him trying to escape. In each new episode, everybody has a number, they don't have a name, right? And McGowan is number 6, and he's always fighting to get off the island, right? And the whole mystery of the thing is who's number 1, right? Because every episode there was a new number 2, and number 2 was like in charge of the whole island, but you never can figure out who number 1 is, right? Who's number 1? Nobody tells you, right? Until the end of the series, right? And at the end of the series, it turns out number 1 is actually Peter McGowan himself, right? So it's like, whoa, that kind of blows your mind going, how does that work, right? That's kind of a similar thing to hear. You think all through all the Toy Stories that you watched, Buzz Lightyear, the toy or whatever, he was always battling like Zurg or whatever his name is, right? And Zurg ends up being him from the future, right? So, and the third film is The Quick and the Dead. I enjoyed this when this movie first came out because I watched it in the theater, and it was quite good. It's funny seeing Russell Crowe as like a minor character. I mean, he's not a minor character, but he's not the main character of this. The main character is Sharon Stone, and then the second main character is Gene Hackman and his son Leonardo DiCaprio, and then he's like this outlaw turned priest as well. So I guess all four of them stars, but Russell Crowe isn't the main person. It's Sharon Stone. It's basically a Western with a woman lead. All right. And basically, the story is she is going to kill Gene Hackman because Gene Hackman ruined her life. I'm not sure if he killed her brother or husband. I can't remember. But she has a vendetta against Gene Hackman. And every year in Gene Hackman's town that he runs, they have a sharpshooting competition, but not for targets, for people, like duels between people. And then the person who wins the duel survives the duels, like this round robin duel thing, ends up winning like $500,000 or something like that, right? So she enters it just because Gene Hackman every year always enters it because Gene Hackman is like the best gun shooter, right? So she's gonna kill him that way, right? And it's an interesting. It's not a great Western, but it is good, and it's directed by Sam Raimi, the Evil Dead director, the guy who directed Evil Dead and the Spider-Man films. So I collect him. So this was one of the films that he did, so I collected it. All right. I picked up these three films just yesterday when I picked up this book, right? And that is the short films collection of Walt Disney. All right. So it has a bunch of the shorts. All right. There's a Pixar version of this as well. I think it's 2 or 3 volumes of Pixar shorts. So I guess Disney wanted to put out their own ones as well, and so they did. So I have this. I haven't watched this yet, so I'm going to watch it. Then Live and Let Die. One of the Roger Moore James Bond films. All right, my favorite one is the one where he goes up in space in Moonraker. That's my favorite James Bond film of all time. And Roger Moore starred in that one too. But you get Jaws and other characters, and then Jaws falls in love. I thought that was cool. He's such a mean guy, and in a lot of the Roger Moore James Bond films, Jaws is, and I can't remember the name of the actor. But in this one, he's kind of like falling in love with this little tiny blonde girl, right? So, anyways, it's a good film. The era with Daniel Craig made Bond a very serious guy, but with all the films with Roger Moore, there's a bit of humor involved in most of them, right? So I found that, so I'm going to resell that, and I found this one as well, Dirty Harry. I have the full collection of all the Dirty Harry films, so I didn't need this, but this is a nice digipack version of Dirty Harry. It has a booklet inside, right? So I thought, yeah, I could probably sell this for a pretty good amount of money. So it was worth buying. And I don't know if you've seen Dirty Harry, but it's basically, Clint Eastwood started off in westerns, like spaghetti westerns. That's how he made his name. He wasn't doing, he did Gunsmoke, I think, right? But he wasn't making it really big in Hollywood, so he kind of went to Italy and did a bunch of Italian spaghetti western films with Sergio Leone, right? And that made his name, and then he came back, and then he did like the Clint Eastwood films, where he's basically, a cowboy with a gun, but in an urban environment, so he's a cop, right? So he plays that character really well. He played it in pretty much most of, if not all of his films. Oh, this is the fourth one, and that's Red Heat. This one is directed by Walter Hill, so I picked it up. It's not one of Walter Hill's greatest films. Jim Belushi is not very good in this. He's not a very good actor, all right? Schwarzenegger did a really good job playing this Russian, right? He's like, dead face type of thing, and Jim Belushi is the comic, right? So it's kind of like a buddy cop film, but it didn't work. Jim Belushi does not act very well, all right? But Walter Hill directed it, so I picked it up, and I did enjoy it when I watched it. It's just not a great film, let's put it that way. And I don't know why so many of these films end up having 4Ks when the Blu-rays are just, you know, just as good, really. I mean, if you're talking about space films and things like that, maybe. But and then I just watched Finding Nemo again for I don't know how many times I've watched this, but I watched it with my son. It was part of the top 100 films that I'm doing reviews with my daughter. So I watched it again. So I watched this. It's a nice steelbook version of it, and I have it in a nice plastic to protect it so it doesn't get scratched. Finding Nemo, if you haven't watched it, it's a really good Pixar film. It basically it's about a father who's married to a mother or his wife, and then a barracuda attack. All right, so they fertilized a bunch of eggs, so they have I don't know hundreds of eggs, right? But they're at the edge of the ocean in a coral area, right, where all the fishes live. And a barracuda comes along and attacks and kills his wife and basically eats all of his offspring except for one egg left. So he survived because he went into a sea anemone, right? And fish don't go in there because they get stung, but clownfish, it doesn't bother them, right? So he's there, and then he wakes up to his wife not being there, so she was killed, and all of the eggs all gone, right, except for one, and that's Nemo. And so he becomes a very overprotective father, and so Nemo starts to rebel, and he ends up going out into the deep part of the ocean off the coral just to prove that he can do it. And then a fisherman ends up picking him up, scooping him up, and then brings him to Sydney, Australia, and he ends up in a fish tank in a dentist's office. And then Nemo's father ends up going searching for him through the ocean, right? And he ends up meeting up with Dory, who is a forgetful fish or whatever. She adds more of the humor to the film. It's an extremely good film if you haven't watched it. Even if you're not watching it with your kids, you'll enjoy the film, right? I picked up this recently as well, Diary of a Mad Housewife. I watched this. Not sure of the point of this film. All right, I think it's a feminist film. I guess you know what I mean. It's a Kino Lorber studio classic, right? And I think there's no real difference between a studio classic from Kino Lorber and a regular, mainstream, like Warner Brothers or Paramount putting out a film as well. But people look at Kino Lorber as like a boutique label, but it's just basically a disc, and sometimes maybe you'll get an advertisement or something here. They're basically just putting it out, more obscure films, but they're basically just regular films. I don't know why people would pay a premium for these, but anyways, this film is about a woman who is married to a pretty god-awful husband who's a ladder climber. He's a lawyer, and he wants to move up in society, and both personally and professionally. He wants to be in the in crowd of New York society or whatever, right? So, and his wife he's always like demeaning and insulting his wife, and his wife is trying to do the traditional housewife thing with him, but it doesn't seem to be going very well. So she ends up meeting this artist. This guy's a painter and other art, and she ends up having an affair with him on her husband, and then at the end they kind of break it off, and she stays with her husband, kind of thing. But it's like I don't know what the point of the film was. Maybe if you've seen it, maybe you can leave it in the comments. I watched it; it was okay. I just don't understand the point of the film. And then when I don't understand the point of the film, I don't understand why they like a boutique label will pick up that film and put it out like a special edition type of thing, right? Another exact thing of that is this one. This is A Woman Kills. This is a film by Jean-Denis Bonne, a French film. A Woman Kills. All right. This is one of those films that I watched maybe for 30 minutes and then I shut it off because it was stupid. I found it stupid, let's put it that way. So this is kind of like an underground film that Radiance picked up, and put out, but it's a pointless film. I don't understand the reason for this film. So they just put it out to put it out. It's kind of avant-garde, I guess, type of cinema, nudity and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not linear. It doesn't tell a story. It's just basically black and white. It's like art for art's sake, you know what I mean, kind of idea, where he takes the camera and makes art visually or whatever in black and white, but the story sucks. The storyline is bad. It's so slow moving that it makes you fall asleep. But this is Radiance has come on the scene recently, and they're like the Criterion collection basically, but with different films, and they're numbered. This one is number 8 in the collection, but I don't collect Radiance films. They seem to be, they do the whole shebang to it. They give you a nice booklet. They do interviews and everything else on the Blu-ray. They have the Radiance cover, right, which is like this thing, right? All right. But you can also switch it. It has a reversible cover, so it does all the things that Criterion do or other boutique labels do. But the film is just a piece of crap, in my opinion, anyways. All right, and then I watched this, Housekeeping, and this was an interesting film, but another film that I didn't understand the point to. This is Indicator. Indicator is a British label that puts out cinema as well. Now this one is universal. It's not just like European or British. So you can play this film, at least this version of the film, on any Blu-ray player, right? It's a Bill Forsyth film. I collected it because it's part of the Indicator collection. I collect Indicator. It's number 29 in the film. The story itself is basically about two children, two girls, who end up becoming orphaned and move in with their grandparents until they get to be teenage age, and then their grandmother or grandparents die or whatever. So then they start living with their eccentric aunt, and then they kind of, the girls were inseparable for most of their life, and then they kind of have different wants, and one kind of moves out of the aunt place, and the other one kind of befriends and becomes close to the aunt, and the aunt's kind of loopy, right? But again, I don't understand the point of the film, so like I said, I was hoping I would enjoy it, but I didn't. But it's part of the collection that I have, so I'll keep it. That's the reason why I bought it in the first place. I do watch them, but Kino Lorber's and Indicators and other of these labels put out movies that you think there's some sort of quality to them. It's not. It's just like there's these random films that came out in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and the ones that nobody talk about or haven't been picked up by somebody else. Let's go grab them and put them out, right? And it's like, okay, so now I pick it up and I watch a bad film. Okay, it was a bad film back in the 1960s, and now it's the 2020s, and it's still a bad film. So anyways, it's hit and miss when it comes to boutique labels and their films, right? Criterion has a pretty good record. Usually when you watch a Criterion movie, there's some sort of merit to that film, right? But the other boutique labels, not so much. And now much of the boutique labels are going into the mainstream films, right? And what's the difference if I pick up a Blu-ray that put up by Warner Brothers for $5, or if I pick up an Arrow of the same fucking film and it's $65? Do you know what I mean? It's all packaging, right? So, all right. So then I found this. All right. So I didn't find any of the Rocky films on like a package for Blu-ray. This has come out in a Blu-ray as well, but I've kind of skipped over to the 4K. All right. Because they put out the 4K, but I'm still looking for the Blu-ray version of this, because I have some of the individual films, and then I have a DVD of these films, but I didn't have a Blu-ray of them, and so I was looking for the Blu-ray, but I ended up finding the 4K before I found the Blu-ray version of this. So this is basically all the Rocky films in 4K in one package, right? So cool. It's still new. So I picked it up for like half the price it is on Amazon if I was to buy it new, right? So, and I got it new as well, so pretty cool. I don't know if you watched any of the Rocky films. They're good. The first one is extremely good. One of the great sports films, probably the best boxing film ever made. Up to the fourth one is probably they're fun to watch, because the first one he loses to Apollo Creed, and so there's a rematch, and then he beats Apollo Creed in the second one, and then Clubber Lang, who's Mr. T. That was always interesting when that film came out. It was like, oh, we get to see Mr. T fight, right? So, but it's kind of becoming formulaic, the boxing scenes in the ring or whatever, right? They beat the crap out of each other. It's like neither one know how to defend themselves, right? It's just, I'll punch you in the face, and then but anyways, it's like who can take a beating worse, right? So, and then there's two fights in that one where he loses to Clubber Lang, and then he beats him at the end of the film to gain back the title again. And then the fourth one is with Drago, this Russian behemoth, right? That he fights, right? So, and all through the films, it's like, I can't remember, was it the second film where the doctor says you shouldn't be fighting anymore because you have a detached retina, or there's something wrong with your eye, and if you keep fighting, you're going to be blind. And then he fights for another 2 or 3 movies or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny that, right? So, anyways, it's a good franchise. It's fun. It's entertaining, and the characters in them are quite good, like Mr. T and what's his name, the wrestler there. Hulk Hogan was in it. He played Sugar Lips or Mr. Sugar Lips or whatever. I can't remember. A wrestler, and he, as a for charity, he fights him. He's like, Rocky looks so small compared to Hulk Hogan in the ring. Anyways, but that was kind of cool as well. So you get a bunch of characters in the films, and they're fun to watch. So, but after Khal Drago, the films later, and then the Creed films. Nah, I think 1 to 4 is basically it, and then everything after is kind of crap, basically. All right, so that's Rocky on 4K. Then I found this Simon and Garfunkel in Central Park, the concert in Central Park. All right, so this is probably their best live album. All right, and basically when it came out on LP, and it was 2 LPs, and they fit both LPs on one disc. So you have one disc, right? And it's basically Simon and Garfunkel going through all their best music live. So it's a very good CD if you still collect CDs, anyways. And then I found this. Now, remember when I was talking about the Folio Society book that I showed you, I collect the newer version of the Everyman Library. This is the newer version. All right, so there's no numbers on the spine anymore. The number is on the title page. So this is number 11 in the series. There's just over 400 volumes in the Everyman Library that started in the 90s or whatever. So these are all really nice editions. They're different colored. They're red. They're green. They're different colored depending on what the subject matter of the book is. And it's kind of cheap. This gold print is just printed over top of it, but they all look like this. So if you want to take the dust jackets off of them and put them on a thing, they basically all look the same, just different colors, right? So you can do that. But the problem with doing that is they get all dusty, and this wears off, chips off. This chips off after a while. So I always keep them in the dust jackets. There's different dust jackets, so that, it's not as uniform looking. If you put them on with the dust jackets, you have some that look like this, and you have some that look different. Like some of them are red, orange colored, or whatever, and everything, right? So this is Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Basically, it's one of the great zenith books of economics. All right, and everybody who studies economics will eventually read this book. All right, and it's number 11 in the Everyman Library. So I didn't have it. So now I added. I don't know. I think I'm up to 200 maybe of these volumes. I think there's over 400, so I'm halfway there maybe. I'm guessing. I don't know. I'd have to count them, but this is another addition to it. If you haven't read The Wealth of Nations and you like business and economy and that kind of thing, it really is an enjoyable read. And then I found 3 Criterions from this guy, Blu-rays, right? So I have Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and it's number 535 in the collection, all right? Then I have Memories of Murder, all right, which is number 1073 in the collection, all right? And then I have Harakiri, all right, which is number 302 in the collection, all right? So in these ones, there's over 1,200 Criterions, and I'm around 600 now. So I'm like about halfway through the Criterions. I'm trying to collect the first 1,000 because they always add more. Every month there's like 3 or 4 more. Sometimes they're just 4K upgrades of Blu-rays or DVDs, but sometimes they add a new title to their collection. So it keeps getting bigger, and I'm not going fast enough that, like, you know, I'll be dead before I. But I think I can maybe get the first 1,000 maybe. You know what I mean? So I'm about 600 in. And every week I end up picking up more, either DVDs, Blu-rays, or 4Ks, right, of titles in the collection, right? So I'm thinking about maybe doing special videos on collecting the Criterion itself, just collecting it. And so I would have a video maybe of these 3, go through what the movies are about and all that, right? So I haven't watched them yet. So when I do, we'll add that review to an upcoming video, right? And that's looks like everything. All right. So if you enjoyed the video, leave me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing. We do stuff on media, whether it's books, sports cards. Not a lot of sports card stuff, but sometimes I will get an urge. And, you know, comics occasionally, but mostly it's books, music, and especially film. All right. And we just go through what we collect, do reviews of different books and films and CDs and stuff. And if you enjoy that type of content, think about subscribing. And I'll talk to you in my next video. You have a great day. Bye for now.